All right, welcome back from those video shorts. Hope you enjoyed those. We're going to have a couple more of those video shorts throughout the day. But right now we've got our second panel lined up. So we want to introduce that panel. Remind you that as we go through this session, tweet your questions to #SocialTVEvent, and also through the Watch2 platform. That's been working really well today. Our team is grabbing those questions and sending them to me throughout the session. So as they come to you, just tweet those questions out, and I'm trying to kind of put those together. At the end of the sessions, we'll do kind of like a little 15, 20 minute, 25 minute Q&A so that you guys can kind of interact with the audience and get the answers out to them that they're looking for. Also, if you're able to, snap the event or snap any part of the event as you go through it. That's right below your video player there. It's the red button that has snap on it. So if you guys are going to enjoy this. We're going to talk on this panel a little bit about the product lifecycle and what it takes to create a product, take it from ideation all the way through design and development, and right up until we launch thing. You guys, what I'm going to do is it's going to be like a town hall kind of style. I'm going to sit over there. I'm just going to shoot questions at you for about the next hour or so and just have a conversation like that. So I say we just get at it. Why don't we start by just introducing yourself to the audience. Just tell them who you are, what you do, and maybe if there's something kind of interesting that you're working on right now, mention that.
I guess I'll start. So I'm Mick. I'm CEO of User Insight, and the nice thing about the job that we do is we're always working on something interesting and new, but I can't often talk about it. So it was nice to actually get to talk about this space today in the social TV space. I guess one of the more interesting things we're seeing customers bring us is the mobile space. So how are people using mobile applications? What are they doing with their iPhones and iPads? What do they care about? What are those experiences, and how do they have to work? If you look 2 or 3 years ago, we would have said that most of the stuff is on a PC or a Mac or some kind of desktop system, but that's really not what we're seeing the most of.
My name is Snider. I work for Yahoo. I'm Senior Product Manager there. Been there about 8 years. I spent some time at Cox Cable, so I got some time in the cable industry and CNN, which is the broadcast industry. I was on the CNN.com side of that. And I work with a lot of our broadband partners to bring Yahoo experiences to mobile devices and tablets and television. Primarily I work on interactive TV applications, so the last one we deployed was Flickr. So it gave a rich experience on the TV where you could watch your slideshows with your family.
I'm Mick Darling, CEO of TweePLayer. Right now it's my only baby project that I do everything with it right now. It's an app that captures and synchronizes conversation on social media with video after the fact. So if you're watching a Hulu video a week after it aired on TV, we'll show you the entire Twitter conversation that aired while that show was live when it originally aired. And we let people add new parts into that conversation and curate it and have a lot of kind of long tail process for the social conversation on social TV.
I was actually checking that out.
Yeah.
I'm Henderson. I'm a product director at Clearleap, and we help both video service providers and premium content owners deliver massive libraries of content to any device. So we're kind of a secure IP-based architecture, helping bring essentially cable into the new world of IP-based delivery and get that experience to any device, and also bring kind of the rich consumer experience to connected TVs and mobile devices alike. Primarily focused on the big screen because we do work with cable companies and that's their kind of primary offering, but we are helping them reach those additional devices. But I focus again specifically on the consumer experience and offering something compelling so that they can retain and attract new subscribers and increase their revenue in the age of rapidly changing TV technology and a lot of players out there trying to take away their business.
So it's great, Hillary. Actually, that's a nice segue because one of the things we're doing with this conversation today in this event is relating a lot of what these different companies do and how it affects that end user experience, what the consumer is expecting and experiencing. And so on the last panel, I asked them to define social TV. It was an interesting conversation, and we figured out that Wikipedia doesn't have the only definition. But what I'd like to do is start off with you guys and ask you, what do you think the end customer defines social TV as? Anything can start.
Go back.
Yes, that's excellent. I think it's a shared emotional connection to an experience. I think that's the case with any media, not only TV, but with anything, books, gaming. We see any connected device can offer a connected experience with other viewers, but I really think the viewer is looking for emotional connection to a shared experience. I think your product, kind of brings that very, very nicely. But and I think they also would expect to have all their content curated. So what they wonder about what the wisdom of crowd says about a particular thing, or who are the tastemakers, and to find and discover new things like that. So I think those two are pretty key elements and interesting things about social TV.
Yeah, and you use the word that we actually use internally. We use viewer instead of consumer or user explicitly because we don't want to think of them as they're just a user they're just consuming. It's just coming down the pipe. It's an interactive process. So those viewers, they're watching it and they're doing something when they view it. They're interacting with it. So yeah, what social TV means to them is, for a lot of them, it's where they go for the conversation. It's their water cooler. And that's one of the things that we try to really take advantage of, to make sure that we get as much water cooler conversation over long term as we can. And that's kind of what we try to focus on, to make sure
I think you both dead on. I think considering that viewers is a traditional television way to look at the audience, if the question is what do viewers or users think of social TV, I don't know that they even know what social TV is. I think we know what social TV is. I think it's an industry term, but I think it's an industry term that applies to social media as it relates to television shows. So specifically, how am I using Twitter, or how am I using Facebook to either complement the show or make a recommendation or follow a plot line or follow a character? And I think users are expected to be pretty ubiquitous. I think they just want their social interactions there. And maybe they're starting to understand, I need to download an iPad app or an Android app or something like that in order to enable this social capability. But with the new Apple iOS, putting Twitter in there and embedding it, it really becomes a lot easier for people to kind of just get into the conversation. And that's kind of what I think social TV is all about. It's that shared television experience.
And I like you use the word ubiquitous because I think that's how we look at it. You know, when we were in the 90s, everybody talked about the internet. And what are you going to do on the internet? And it was really cool that you could pay your bill on the internet, right? And now you're just like, you totally expect that to happen and to be a very easy process. But what I think is really interesting about this space in particular is there was this concept, and I don't remember who talked about it back in the 90s, of cocooning, so that people would pick who they would interact with. So you wouldn't necessarily interact with your neighbor, but you would interact with people who might be across town, across the country, in another country, who had like similar interests. And those would become your friends and sort of your neighbors and the people that you interact with. So it's cocooning or alone together. So you may be with a group of people, like I was talking about the Super Bowl party earlier. That really did happen. I went to a Super Bowl party and talked to my Twitter friends, you know, part of the time, and then also interacted with them. So I think it really allows us to take that TV thing, which is really common to a lot of people, and talk to other people that have common and similar interests that may not be like right next door, even in our own house, and have that conversation.
I think it's useful for actually figuring out plot lines or stories or characters. Yeah. I mean, or who was that character? Why did they do that?
I might have done a better job of Lost, because I was really right, exactly. Lost, right?
There was a discussion on The Daily Show that they had a guy who was, I think, a puppet or puppeteer or something. I can't remember what it was. But he was making some really out there jokes, trying to figure out. And reading the Twitter conversation was able to tell me, oh, that's what he's talking about.
Yeah. You relied on the inside
Yes,
joke.
exactly.
So I think it's difficult. I think it's challenging to define what it is. Because I think there's actually two definitions, sort of what social TV means as an industry term. I think there's social TV that's explicitly measurement around TV shows. How many Twitters is a show getting? How many likes is a show getting? And this is what companies like Trender or Bluefin are measuring. And it goes back to ratings and how popular is the show? Is it going to get a lot of downloads later on? Will we sell the DVD? Will it stay on air? And then I also think there's the social TV definition. So I kind of think there's two definitions. There's social TV, where it's more expansive definition that kind of covers the shared television experience, which has been around a long time, which I think is useful for us to figure out, well, where's it going to go? For instance, your platform, without kind of thinking, well, what is this shared experience and where's it going to go? You probably want to come up with something like that.
Wouldn't even occur to me. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So I think it's key to have that sort of two distinctions of the way, you know, in the industry we're talking specifically social TV is complementing TV shows. But at the same time, TV is social.
Yeah.
Chris, I was reading one of your blogs a few weeks ago, and you were talking about that a little bit, about the different perspectives that define social TV. And so I'm curious, so if we just look at two perspectives, and that's the company perspective that's creating content or product or advertisers creating campaigns, and the user perspective. And do you guys feel, I guess you could talk to other companies, but in your company in particular, do you feel like those definitions are aligned? Do you feel like the company is towing the same line as the user?
Wow, that's a challenging question. I think there are, I think it depends on the content program. I would take it outside Yahoo, and I'll look at somebody like USA Networks. I think they do a fantastic job of understanding the programming and creating this character chatter. So I don't know if you've seen it. I mean, it's all about the character chatter and developing the characters so they are chattable, and really developing plot lines and storylines where the user is engaged and they've complemented that on the website and provide the ability for people to talk with their characters. So I think they do understand the ability to kind of create the social TV atmosphere. I think, and that's what their users are expecting. I think they kind of create these TV shows that are border on campy, but kind of fun. But they know their audience very well. And I think the key is knowing your audience and knowing how to apply these social TV effects.
I think it's interesting to look at certain shows that may have been considered unsuccessful. So, like, and I'm not exactly like Arrested Development is coming back and somebody's doing that, because they have such this cult following and it's this important show. And Lost could have been that. I mean, it could have gone off the rails of certain kind of the general audience. So, looking at when a show is adopted by the general population, and then when it's adopted maybe by a niche market that's an important niche market that might be influential, is something that this allows you to do, to know that that's something that would be important to maybe bring back or to continue on.
I mean, Glee is a powerhouse now, but it started off by just having a lot of social interaction, people just talking all about it. After they saw little bits of it, they wanted to see more of it, and they were chatting about it. And so when it finally re-aired it 6 months later, after that got amazing ratings because everyone heard about it through when they were talking, their friends were talking about it.
And yeah, again, it's about that emotional kind of shared experience versus, I think, Pepsi Pulse is. They're trying to create this platform for, I can't remember what show it is, it might be American Idol or something, and they're trying to almost create a walled garden, Twitter-like experience, so for you to talk about your experiences you're having during this show. And I feel like, to the point about advertisers versus end consumers, and viewers, you have to really be careful there because a lot of social TV can get really gimmicky and try to get in on the, let's create this fabricated shared connection through Pepsi. Not to say anything, I love Pepsi, but more. But I think if it's a genuine kind of spark in that, you can fan that and get that, that's something different altogether.
Well, that's what social media is, right? I mean, it's supposed to be authentic, and it's really funny how quickly people sniff that out, because television has often been a fabricated space. They'll leave it to Beaver, and this is how the ideal world looks, and now we've seen this kind of adoption to reality shows, and people like that. They can tell. They can tell when it's not authentic.
And you mentioned the walled garden kind of thing. And I think that's a big difference between how businesses treat this versus how the viewers want to interact. They do not want a walled garden because their friends aren't in the garden yet.
Yeah.
They have to drag all of their friends kicking and screaming into, oh, here's a new one that I wanted to talk about. So yeah, if they can take advantage of, putting things out to as many places as possible, and not just to Twitter, but also Twitter and Facebook and Google Plus, and even to some of the smaller, nichier social networks, then all of their friends get to see it, and that's what the viewers, I think, if they have an idea of what they want, they don't want to have to pull people in like that.
And even just their website, I think Sci-Fi Channel did a fantastic job on alphas. I don't know if you've seen it. It's kind of mutants. But they did a thing on the website where snap a photo or snap a video and submit it of somebody who's an alpha. So it really engages the audience into recognize, oh, my friend has a superpower, let me put it up there. Well, then they got sponsorship. And, I think that was kind of authentic, and it was true to the storyline. It got people really engaged in this, mutant power, X-Men kind of alpha mentality. I thought that was a pretty good, really understanding what your product is and delivering it to the audience and delivering that kind of open-ended experience. It's a website and you're posting videos. It couldn't be any more of a standard internet technology, so you don't have to have that walled garden experience in order to be successful.
Kelly, I'm curious if your company's perspective is a tad bit different than maybe the rest of the panel in that you're providing products to people who are providing services and products to their end customers. And then you're also doing it to where you have diverse and different customer sets all across the country. And so that end user experience can be defined in different ways that you may or may not have control over. How do you guys deal with that sort of situation?
Well, I think that it was a very good question, and you're exactly right, because our customers really are these video service providers. So, Verizon and Time Warner use our products, and our end customers are networks such as Scripps or CBS Sports. But using kind of the video service provider example, they are out providing services to their subscribers, and they want to be able to provide compelling things. And as far as the demographic and the diverse groups, we don't really think about, we want to go target early adopters, or 18 to 35-year-olds, or early users of technology who will be into these social TV experiences. We are targeting television viewers, and everyone, as long as it's seamless, is going to enjoy, that, again, that emotional connection that social TV brings, and they won't even really know that, that's what it is. Kind of like Steve Jobs said, there's a recent article about Microsoft's and Apple's kind of different development perspectives, and Microsoft gets things out there very quickly and gets a lot of feedback, and Apple just, says, well, they don't really know what they want until you put it in front of them. So that's kind of our I think our take a little bit, and we do work with our customers. We will provide kind of open APIs so they can develop their own apps off of what we offer if they want to kind of control that experience to their subscribers. But mostly we try to guide them. But again, we target television viewers versus trying to pinpoint any kind of early demographic or user base or persona.
Yeah. When I talk to people about traditional product development, I usually talk in terms of a three-legged stool. Typically you have to think of the business requirements, you have to think of the technical requirements, and you have to think of the user requirements. Does that analogy change now that we're talking about social TV products?
I'll start. I think it depends on which. It's a fine way to start. It's a fine way to develop. It depends on if you can't start with all three legs at once. You have to go with business, tech, or user. And if you start with the wrong one, you might have to cut both of your other legs shorter because that one leg is too short, that you've kind of focused on one particular little thing, and now you're stuck with it. Explicitly in our example, we have a kind of weird thing. It's focused on one person who had one problem that I saw, a person who loved to tweet about television all the time, and she went off to a conference, and she had her TiVo recording everything that she loved, and she wanted to see all that Twitter conversation after the fact when she got home. And she couldn't. And she had to avoid Twitter because all the spoilers were on it. It was the last season of Lost. And so by focusing on that one user problem, and then figuring out how to solve that, and then expanding to figure out, can technically we do it? Yes, we can figure out technically how to handle it. Now, let's figure out, is there a business model around that? And you can wrap a business model around almost any idea. It's just a matter of figuring out, get clever. But I mean, almost anything can find a niche to it. That's kind of my exact. But we got that. We saw it.
You have to start with the Yahoo one. We've not really new products with others. Look at our audience. What do they want? How is it applicable? What really needs stuff we're taking, say, or we want to look at these heavy work on TV, which is an extremely limiting device. Tablet and a keyboard, there's touch input data, and to get to the data. taking a look at what's on the applications and capabilities of it, which is what I'm most familiar with. Method in 1995 used very large graphics, it's a little bit different than the video. Kind of understand the technical requirement. Why do I need to bring the sports problem I try to solve? And a lot of times it's kind of be everywhere. Just now, TV is just another place to bring it.
I think the concept, you look at the three-legged stool, it has not necessarily that you're just going to build this, all these different people testing, we're not sure, is it Droid, is it sort of that lean forward, where of course you talk about what the customers have, like where are they going next, that's really what's the next wave, or the next interesting thing.
That's with our company, with video on demand, just kind of the traditional experience. Well, that was an easy problem to solve. Just the horribleness of the user navigation and the trying to dig down in different bubbles, and it just was so odd to us that that technology hadn't been kind of introduced to these the cable companies. I think now we see Comcast starting to do interesting things with Xfinity, but kind of everyone else, it's just taking so long to get into. But the problem of just being able to find and discover and navigate to content I want to watch and have different, again, using social is a great, I think a great, the broader on what problem you're going to absolutely, but it kind of ties to making our customers successful.
A little bit into that and at work for you guys each day. Here at User Insight, when we talk about ideating, we do it in a war room, and we can tell you some really funny stories about those war rooms. Eric might share a few, I don't know. But I'm curious, when you guys are at work and you're talking about new products or you're talking about new features or functionality, how does that whole process start? Give us a glimpse of what happens in your teams and where you kind of take those conversations.
I'll start. I'm fresh off something that we did a pretty classic war room. Took a small conference room and tape and stickies and a few printouts and put a lot of ideas up on the walls. And we did start with personas. So for sports, we took a look at the different types of. They're a little bit different than the ones you developed because these were specific to the types of sports individuals. So for the ideation phase, we said, all right, well, there's fanatics, and then there's sort of the casual. I want to know what's going on in sports because I need to hold a conversation in the office type people. So you have this whole broad spectrum of personas, and people are different into sports and into sports differently, and they look at the application and look at content differently. They want to discover content. Maybe they're a huge fan of a particular college or university. Well, they're really just interested in that team. They don't care about any of the other sports. So how do you build an application, and how do you bring content to these particular persona types? So we really just started doing some brainstorming, using kind of classic war room mentality, did the ideation around, well, what features do we have? What content do we have? How does this user discover content? How are they going to discover content, in this case on the TV? And, for those people who are really crazy stats, sports fanatics, maybe they won't use this TV app, or maybe they will because they're still a TV fanatic, but they'll probably still use their iPad, or maybe even more their PC, because that's how you can drill into Excel spreadsheet. What does this player do? So we really did start with the user. Kind of idea, the feature from there.
Our whole company was started with getting in a room and figuring out what problem to solve. So, I think the same thing is applied to as we move forward with new products.
Yeah, what we're seeing, I think, is we have two types of customers who bring us products about a week before launch, and they want to know if there's going to be any problems.
Are we on the right track?
Yeah, it's always so sad.
As always, yes.
Yeah, it's always so sad. Or they brought a product, they want to do some ideation and figure out really what should they build. The interesting thing is that the internet, and this is sort of the internet is sort of the mainframe of the 90s. Like, internet websites are the mainframe of the 90s. Back then you had the green screen, you're trying to move this information onto this big website. The website needs to service everyone. You have to figure out who can do everything. So you had that, at least common denominator. 80% of the people need to be able to perform these primary tasks on this website. Well, what we see now is this separation of things into bite-sized chunks. So I'm going to do acquisition one place, I might look up things in another, and so there's less around quote-unquote usability, even though that's important. It's more about, will I do those things, and how am I going to do them, and do I even want that much? Because over-delivering within some of these platforms is as dangerous as maybe under-delivering.
Is that a feature worth spending
Right,
time to build?
it's way too complicated.
Especially on TV, you really people
Right.
want to do one or two things at a time.
Well, on TV, or even on a second screen. So if I'm using second screen in support of my TV use, I really don't want it to take away. Or if I'm using it instead of, then it may be a completely different thing that I'm doing.
And certain customers are even worried about whether that takes away or not.
Right.
And some are even like, no, we don't want any second screen. We want all eyeballs on that.
I know, and it's just that's so dangerous, right? Because, it's sort of like I think we have this space where customers really can vote. They can say, well, then I'm going to watch it this way. There's lots of distribution models for a lot of these products, and they'll either choose to either contribute or not.
Well, that goes back to this sort of a lean forward, lean back. In an interactive TV application, like you assume it's a lean forward because they've chosen to engage with the remote control in an interactive experience, but we also took a look at it and say, do we want a button there that says, well, just show a playlist of videos, and then the person can lean back, and so we have both modes.
Right.
So we really wanted to take a look at that, again, going back to the viewer and say, well, we're on TV, what is the TV experience? Even though we're doing all this sort of disruptive internet technology, it's kind of colliding the television. It's still TV viewers and still watching TV.
One of our major parts of our product that kind of developed through watching people interact with it and seeing some of the problems that happen. We do it in the startup sense. Try a little bit, doesn't work or not, try a little more. The big room is me and my partner. So, and so for us, it was seeing that for certain shows, there's 20 messages, 20 tweets, 20 status messages displayed every second. And that's impossible to read. For any human being, the process of that is not interesting. And taking a look at what actual content is there, there's a lot of that that's on topic. It's definitely about it, but not interesting. And so we developed a whole automated curation tool based on that one problem and trying to fix it. So letting the computer figure out what's the best possible tweet to display for this person and how fast can a person view a tweet and interact with it, and do they want to reply, retweet it, do they want to do something with it, and then give them the next good piece and the next good piece.
And I think that's important when you get something out there. It doesn't have to be perfect, just kind of, all our products are perfect, but just kind of, get something out early and get user feedback. And we have the advantage of, kind of having two layers of one, working through our partners to do trials and see how it's going, and we'll survey people and get, information back and fold that in. But just kind of the initial reaction from our, our kind of initial customers of the service provider themselves. Well, of course, everyone will have opinions, and we try to stick to research and what the actual user feedback is. But we have we get a lot of good early feedback about what's working, what's not, what's we think is so obvious that it's not. You don't know until you put it in front of the consumer.
And then there's always the office trial. Grab somebody in the office.
Right.
Can you try this? Does it work for you?
You click this, what do you think is going to happen?
I think everybody uses that approach. I think you have to test it out yourself and test it out with people who are around you and see what they think about it.
Yeah, eat your own dog food.
Absolutely.
So then, you were talking about the lean forward, lean back concept, but how does the DVR, time shifters, how does that change the way that you think about product development?
Well, that's our bread and butter.
So let's start with
we want to take advantage. It's time shifters, I think, as a group, rather than saying DVR users or this or that, because all things in this sector, there's more and more parts to it. There's people time shifting using on demand. There's people time shifting using DVRs. There's online video. There's video that they put on their loaded onto their iPad to take on the train with them. There's all kinds of different. So we focused on originally DVRs and now mostly online video. And we basically just straight up focused on them. We're going to be dealing with time shifters. We do also work with live, but we almost entirely focus on people that want to watch this particular piece of content now, and they want to be able to do everything they could do before if they were watching it live. Basically take that live experience and move it, time shift all the parts, not just the video. And that's kind of what we decided to do, because that's what time shifting does right now. It just does the video. We wanted to take everything else and move it over.
I think it's probably the largest challenge in social TV, because I think social TV by nature, it's really a lot of the efforts now are trying to solve that live event and trying to drive users to watch the show now, don't watch it on a DVR, don't skip my commercials, and I think that's a huge motivation for the programmers and the advertisers is, hey, be part of the show, the season finale's now, you don't want to miss what's going on with the season finale, you don't want to catch it in a later Twitter feed. I mean, but you're solving something that happens, and I think that's two sides of the coin.
It's interesting. I mean, it's like it will happen, right? So
yeah,
if people still want to time shift it, he'll build a product
exactly.
that's been time shifted. So you can't fight them.
What I like to say is I have a dozen favorite shows or a dozen shows that I like to watch. There's almost always going to be two on at the same time, regardless of. And if I'm not a time shifter, if I'm just a lean-back viewer, I still want to watch those two shows. That's not my persona. That's not the way I deal with things by saying, all right, I'll watch this one now and this other one later. So how do you solve that problem? Because you always are going to find situations where if I have two shows at the same time, I want to watch both of them. I can't watch them at the same time. Two screens next to each other just never works.
Well, watching the ads, whether it's now or 3 days later.
No, but if you're pausing them and waiting for the stream to catch up and then switching to the other show and then switching back. I've done it, it's a challenge. But I think social TV is an answer. I mean, it's attempting to really kind of address those folks who are doing the time shifting. I think part of it is the reality in the live event stuff, especially for sports. I mean, replaying it's interesting, but once you kind of heard the news of who won the game, a show, a game, or a football game, or a baseball game, it's just not as appealing. So I think that's why sports is performing so well, and also the whole social TV right now is it's something you don't want to DVR.
Yes, you want to see that live.
You want to see that live.
Well, social media becomes the substitute if you can't. So we've watched several games over Twitter, right?
Yes.
We're headed somewhere, we're not going to be there, and we watch the hashtag the whole time.
In the streams of the shows that we capture, we see people. We have to figure out how to deal with when people are talking about two shows that they're watching at the same time. Because we see that happen all the time. People are talking about one show and the other show, and it's completely relevant for both of those shows.
Interesting. So I'm curious, back to the joke you were making, though, Chris. Let's talk about syncing, right, and integration, and how does that work in product development? That seems to be, I think users just expect all this stuff to work, right? They turn it on, it all kind of goes together. It's a seamless process. It's got to be amazingly difficult, though, when you're talking about product development. How do you get all these pieces to work together?
Well, I think if we're talking about technology, there's a couple of technologies out there. Yahoo thought it was so important. We bought a company called Into Now, and they have this sound print technology, which takes an audio fingerprint, and there's a couple of technologies. Nielsen has a similar technology. They take a small sample, 3 to 12 seconds, they send it to servers and come back almost instantaneously and tell you what you're watching, which is great because then you can actually synchronize, and if it's good enough technology, it can tell you where you are on the show, so you can actually synchronize an iPad experience. I think Grey's Anatomy did a fantastic job with this, and the technology is less relevant, really. It does that synchronization solve what the end user is looking for. And I think the Grey's Anatomy app did a great job because it synchronized and allowed, while there was a key plot line happening or a scene happening, they would pop up a poll and say, hey, is this guy going to interact with this person? Vote now. And then you could vote, and then a couple scenes later you would see the results of what people thought about that scene. But even more, it actually, I think synchronization really addresses the advertising issue, because when that Lexus ad comes on, and then you see a Lexus ad on the iPad that you can click and see how they've wind tested it, and see all these cool extra features, and open the doors and explore the inside of the car. I think that's what advertisers are really looking for. I think their synchronization is really key to the advertiser solution. I think from an end user perspective, from a programmer's perspective, it's programming the content. I mean, that's a programming challenge for like NBC. They have an iPad app also, and they need to synchronize while the show's happening. Let's program the iPad app also. So you're programming for Twitter, you're programming for Facebook, you're programming for TVs, and then you're doing multiple programming. So you really need to think about that.
There is right now the accessibility to some of the APIs, the programmatical layers of getting information about when that advertisement comes online. You know, when the show is airing on TV and when that ad comes on, harder to get at with some groups than others. Some broadcasters will let you have that information very easily. Some not so much. Some you have to go through a couple of gatekeepers to get to that information. It depends.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's an interesting approach, isn't it? To gatekeep it, because
yeah, if they opened it wide, the number of tools from little clever companies that have ideas that you would never even think of, you know, all kinds of stuff that they just come out of woodwork because it's growing so much, the amount of social interaction with TV right now.
Yeah, it's funny for us, integration, I mean, to integrate with anything within the cable ecosystem is really fun. So this is, I think, because this is all new web technologies, you know, it's that's easy. Relatively. But yeah, we try to take an approach where we can stay flexible and plug into these various, you know, technologies as they emerge, companies as they emerge, you know. Let's talk about seeing if TweePLayer. But you know, we like to offer kind of a base functionality to enable these types of things that I was talking about with the connection and kind of recommendations, but also be able to plug in any kind of new thing that that might come up, or that one of our video service provider partners might want to use or have heard of, or want to kind of fold into the experience. But I think synchronization in real time is challenging to pull off, but very important.
Well, especially on VOD. I mean, through the cable layers and telco layers and the infrastructure, what you really want to know is what the person's using that remote control, pressing OK. They're playing something on VOD. It could be ad sponsored. But then you also want to know where the playhead is so that you can trigger the ad. So you could do that through APIs and not do it through audio. But there's a lot of technology.
There's a lot
of politics, too. So I think that's a challenge for product design, is getting through layers of politics.
And on a technical layer, just getting that information from that box, from whatever's on the screen in front of that person, through all
individuals on cable and your next layer,
back down to the iPad that's sitting in that person's lap, and that added value to them. There's a lot of layers there, and for any particular kind of tool.
And our system. That's exactly kind of the core of what we do, is offer a back office, a way for our customers to drive all the distribution through one central location, so that they can see, okay, this user is using this device, and they're also, they're watching on with the same subscriber, and so that opens up a lot of opportunity to do interesting things across platforms and sync up those accounts and do things like that.
Yeah,
that is a challenge, but that's a piece I think we do a good job solving.
So how do do you, so one of my questions is, with all these different layers, priority in creating new, are you ensuring what's best for the user and the business, or are you also looking at some of the partners, maybe some of the things that's going to happen downstream, like advertising spots, the monetization strategies that we talked about on the last panel? There's a lot of different people in the sandbox. How do you play nice with everybody?
You find the nicest people to play with.
That helps.
Yeah, I mean, we just got a deal with Hulu, and it was a matter for us to just kind of get into the door and start talking to people there at Hulu and find the right contacts there and kind of explain what we do to as many people there that we could and people that had contacts with them, and we played nice with them too. We could have embedded a lot of their content that they allow without their permission and figured out ways to get around them, but instead tried to play nice with them and got their permission and did things very cleanly. So that, and we were told later, if we had done that, it would have gone much less well for us in making that kind of partnership deal. So you start with the people that you play nice in the playground, and you find the good kids to play with.
And it's kind of knowing the playground. I think it's easy to in the telco and cable and TV industry, and it's a long industry that has its protocols and contracts and relationships with some of the different content providers. And you discover things that would affect your product that you wouldn't realize. If you are working with a television service provider, you would think sticking content next to a show might be easy. Well, technically, it's very easy. I've been developing on the Microsoft Media Room IPTV technology platform. It's a very web internet technology platform. So that wasn't the challenge. The challenge was if we stuck this up there, well, we couldn't put a logo on that because whoever's broadcast next to it has a contract saying, I don't want any other sponsorship, and I consider that sponsorship. So, if you're in the over-the-top kind of scenario and you're working with a box or a device or a TV, and you can overlay it, well, the game's different there. It still doesn't make people happy. So you have to understand, I think, some of that play around. Play nice with it.
Yeah, well, what's great with this space is like TV was there. I mean, of course, had radio and some of the disruption there, but TV's been there, and then it sort of made it through what we saw in the 90s and some of that, and so now it's sort of this place that there's some badland, like what's going to happen, who's going to sort of come out the other end of that, and how do you make sure you play nicely, because we've got lots of industries we can point to right now that have gone through the same convergence very quickly, music industry, all those types of players. And so you've got rules, but how do those rules help you moving forward or not, and where does that put you?
And in the TV industry, 10 years ago, was more like what the big RIAA audio,
exactly.
Recording industry was, where there were a few very big players. It's kind of moved beyond that. You now have a lot of indie developers, basically, a lot of indie video, all over the place, and all different kinds of content all around the world, because the ability to produce good quality video that people want to watch has just ballooned.
Right.
And so now you can kind of choose who your partners are going to be, by which ones are easiest to work with. I mean, for you, it's going out and finding the right ones that you can partner with, and they'll take advantage of your product where others may not want to immediately.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yes, there's a lot of ballooning and fragmentation. I think there are still the gatekeepers.
Oh, there's some big players out there.
Of the cable companies, and they actually have the advantage, and this is going off on a little bit of a tangent, but they have the advantage of kind of they're in your homes already. So if they get it right, and we can kind of play nicely with a lot of the content and device partners that we have, and we can help them get it right. They can really succeed, I think. And you're wondering, okay, what's coming? Who's next? Well, it can be them if they kind of stay ahead of these kind of consumer trends and give consumers what they want when they want, and on whatever device. Right, we've heard it. That's the kind of the silver and the technology's there. It's just all the politics that kind of prevents that from happening. But we have to play nice with a lot of, again, device partners and content partners, dynamic advertising systems, and all of this to kind of figure out how we bring that all together for our customers. But I think they really can. Someone was saying about the maybe emerging players, or you're talking about the indie players, but there's also emerging multi-channel distributors. So I can see an Amazon or a a device manufacturer coming and being your cable provider, right?
Well,
consumers don't
Netflix.
care where they get it.
Is it within, I don't know, they look at the networks differently. They look at it as like Hulu, Netflix.
Yeah.
They don't even
Exactly,
consider
those are
those.
cable companies,
Yeah,
right? Those
those
are
are
the cable companies,
yeah.
But cable companies are there again. They're in your homes.
Well,
All they have to do is offer this in one service. They're
right.
good, but they don't. They're not. So.
Well, one of the interesting statistics, Tino, at the beginning, they showed the social media thing, and like 50% of the population, the world's population, is under the age of 30. And that's also the group that doesn't put cable in their house. So, it's sort of this thing of, okay, cable providers making sure that they're kind of capturing that group and knowing where they are, and they're not necessarily going to put the cable box in their house. They don't even have a home telephone, so what is that? How does that
It
work?
goes back
How does that
to,
work?
is it television industry?
Right.
Or television.
Right.
Television,
Exactly, or
it
entertainment.
may be video.
Right.
I mean, if I'm watching a Hulu video or a YouTube video, it's television. I mean, I'm sending a video over distance, which is kind of the definition of television. Right? Which is different than a TV show and the television industry, which is kind of a formal structure industry. So I think that's when we say fragmentation, and it's really television changing into video. Anything, and having an iPad, kids think the iPad is a TV. Okay, give me the TV. I don't ask for the iPad. I say, give me the TV. Give me the television, right? Because that's where they watch videos. So even the concept of television is kind of changing a little bit.
I definitely think we talked about that in the last panel, the definition of television. What does it mean? And one of the things that they teed up that I think is perfect for this panel is how do you decide when you're doing product development, how do you decide what features and what functionality go on which device? They're talking about TV everywhere. I can experience this thing everywhere. We've heard some different things in the research that we've done about where and how people want to interact with TV and TV-related content. How do you guys decide where that content goes? Or where those features go?
Well, I think it's funny to build off because you talked about, you're using the big screen, but it also has the limited functionality. Well, then some of the studies that we did, some of the older respondents actually loved that Facebook would be on their television set because they could see it better. It would be bigger. So it's sort of like, that mixed modality because it does have the least, you can't do things on your remote control, that type of thing. So it's features and functions because you might assume, oh, you'd never put Facebook on the television, but then your over 60 crowd is like, this is great, I can see it. I can read RSS updates and stuff. So
Features no good if you can't look at it.
Yeah, we think that video is, and I think you guys probably largely agree, you build apps on TV, so that might not be video-centric necessarily, but that's the killer app for the kind of lean-back experience. Which you probably would agree with me. And so it's really a matter of just enabling that kind of really easy, intuitive experience on the big screen. And we kind of recently worked with LG TV to build an app that, again, if you have an LG TV, you download not Comcast, we don't work with them, but you download your app and get your cable through that. And so that's just a matter of making it really easy to do that with a remote control. Talking about the different platforms, I think how you interact with those platforms is huge. mind and what's going to be easy and not. They don't want to have to spell out a long password to get to that content. They don't want to have to, search is kind of funky, so that has to be really, really quick and intuitive. And so just kind of thinking of the user experience and what they're going to experience it on. But for us, it's all about video and kind of being able to easily watch that, easily find that.
From a Yahoo perspective, we want to put it on everything. That's what Yahoo does. We have lots and lots of video. We stream. We actually have about 30 or 40 little television webisodes, and they're pretty popular. But we have them on the web now. So we're also taking them to the iPad and the iPhone, and as well as we want to bring them to the TV too. So we want to make these available wherever. Because they're video, it makes sense to actually have them on the TV. And as video gets more and more popular on the iPad, we want to put them on there. So we really want to, from a Yahoo larger perspective, we want to put our content on everything. What makes sense on there, I kind of mentioned it before, is some data doesn't make sense on the TV, and again, searches is a real challenge. Search is part of Yahoo, and you do search on Yahoo. And do you want to do that on the TV? No, not really, but if your iPad is connected to your TV because you've paired your iPad to your TV or you've paired your iPad to your set-top box, well, now you can do the search on your iPad and throw the results up on the TV, and it can be a shared experience. People kind of looking at it and go, oh, look what we found out about that character or whatever you were looking up in that case. So it's really kind of deciding which features make sense for what input devices you have and whether, Facebook on a big screen, that's great. It's a great dormitory where now you see everything that's mine, right? And now that's a shared device. So we want to put private things up on email. Does not work on TV. You can put it on the TV, but it's not something you want to do with a bunch of people where you don't want them to see what's in your email.
I think Japanese manufacturers first had connected TVs. They were way out ahead of us with all of this, but it was just browsing the web on TV, and it was horrible user experience, and so, which is good, they failed fast. That's why we're beating Japan technologically.
That's the reason we're wanting to put it on. I want to put TweePLayer and all the other stuff on every device. Yahoo can't.
Exactly, we have to. As you guys, it's probably more of a business decision as to where do we get.
Yes, exactly. So kind of whittling it down. All right, technically, what's the thing that we aim at first, and business-wise, and where's the best shot to hit? And so online video is definitely for us. It's almost a no-brainer. It took a little brains, but to figure out to go right to that online video, because that's where most of the people, if they're going to interact with stuff that's after the fact, the time shifters that are going to be doing an interaction, they're going to be thinking about web and online, that kind of thing. We'd love to, and we have plans to do kind of that second screen process. Phones and pads, whatever, iPhones, iPads, are just going to be phones and pads. 5 years, that's all.
There's no other.
Yeah. And so definitely we want to do that, and that's the kind of thing that we definitely want to aim at. But yeah, right now, online video is definitely the thing that we're focusing on. Just from a business decision, you got to pick your heads.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, so we're going to switch gears a little bit because I've got a ton of questions coming in for you guys. And so, Mick, this was directed right at you. I just grabbed it because it came in and it was relevant to what you were saying. But curious how you guys decide when you're looking at all these tweets, millions of millions of tweets. How do you decide what's relevant? And then how do you decide to add to your product or feature set to add value to what you're giving in the user experience?
So the Emmy Awards, for instance, we just grabbed those a few weeks ago, and they had 280,000 tweets during the show that we captured. And you don't want to read that many in 2 hours. So what we do is we take lots of algorithms. So we figure out keywords. We figure out, are people talking about the show a lot or a little? So are they engaged in the show over the course of 2 hours? Were they tweeting twice or 200 times? If they were tweeting 200 times, is it spam? So are there keys to look for spam? Follow their URLs, follow their other things. Are they getting retweeted? Tons of different little bits of information that you can glean off of one tweet or a dozen or 100 tweets, and their followers and how many they have. And that's how we kind of figure out, all right, so this is something that's very interesting. People have been retweeting it. It's basically wisdom of crowds. You use that to tell you they voted it up by retweeting it, and figuring that out. But then we also have ways of variety filters. Add a little extra variety. If you keep seeing lots of stuff that looks one way, well, that's boring. So maybe we toss in some randomizers to give you a little extra stuff that's a little different. And we
Stumble upon or something like
kind
that.
of like, but stumble a tweet.
And are you filtering out like Neato? Like, I don't want to see a tweet that says cool.
Glee! Exclamation point, exclamation point. That happens so often. That particular tweet.
No value.
And there are hundreds or maybe thousands of those.
And I know which persona that is. Exactly.
And it's relevant, it's on topic, it's about the show at that time, but it's not interesting. So we have to figure out, how to make that interesting. So we put that off to the side. We allow people, this is something we're going to be doing a little later, it's not in the product right now, to see everything if they really want to. You know, a layer of everything. But the main layer of conversation that we provide for people is something that has this kind of really focused interestingness. We actually have an interestingness value that we apply, a score that we give to each tweet. And the computer does it. But if you look at those and you actually look at the scores and you pick out all the high score ones, they are actually very interesting. And so it's lots of little things that just build up to giving you that extra interesting. What was the second half? I don't remember the...
How do you add value to that, right? So you're taking all those things together, you're adding features and functionality to your product.
Yeah.
How do you figure for the long term? How do you adding value?
People add new parts into that conversation. So they're watching it later, a day later, a week later, and they're 5 minutes into the show and they've just seen somebody, that song in Glee, I love that song from Sondheim, blah, blah, blah. That's an interesting tweet. And somebody can respond, oh yes, I sang that song at my high school, musical or something like that. It goes into the system, it's a reply, it goes out to that person as well, they see it. It has a little link. So all of their friends will be seeing that tweet and that link. They click on it, their friends will end up going 30 seconds earlier, just when the music starts, and get to see that video play along. So it adds value to the user and to the customer, who is the one who has embedded this on their player. It adds that extra engagement because they just got somebody's eyeballs on that show, maybe a whole bunch of somebody's eyeballs on that show that wasn't watching it already. Again, and they may tweet about that. They may add into that conversation.
I thought it was interesting when we were talking before we came in here, some of the original things you were looking at, the change of sentiment over time. Potentially for
Absolutely.
So that could be very interesting, not necessarily maybe for Glee, but I could see that for some other spaces.
Yeah, government videos of politicians.
Political debates.
Yes, we're capturing the political debates that are out there and the speeches. And when they talk, when somebody tweets about that live, they may be excited and they're there. And then a week later...
Now the tweets are different.
Yeah, right. Sentiment changes very quickly in politics, and being able to track that over time, a tweet today is different than a tweet tomorrow and the next week.
Who's behind us on that?
Yeah, I can't figure it out. There's probably some value.
To that question, because I think basically, Mick, that you answered most of this, but I got a question: is there a way to design social TV products for present-day Pat, which is one of our personas, considering that they typically watch shows after they've aired? I'm curious, Hillary, what you guys are doing for people who watch it after the live event.
Yeah, well, that's kind of, we do offer kind of linear services as well, but we focus a lot in this space on on-demand video. So all of our kind of product development is around the people who watch it after the fact, because they're watching it kind of when we kind of focus solely on that, and because it's actually a lot of movies, so it's not a lot of live events or kind of after the fact type of things. It's like I said, I think there's this two-pronged approach. One creates the shared emotional connection. I think that piece of it is a little bit difficult to do for certainly social recommendations. What does the social 100 say? Kind of flowing that in along with peer reviews and Rotten Tomatoes and things like that. I think that's kind of the approach we take again to a lot of our social TV product development.
I think what's interesting is people pick certain shows and they just watch those shows. And because they're not necessarily watching shows live, they don't know what else is on. So it's an interesting way, because TiVo back in the day, and I used to love my TiVo, you could thumbs up and thumbs down, and it would make recommendations. So by knowing what somebody's watching, it's on. It doesn't mean they're watching. You know if they're DVRing certain things, and they're only selecting certain shows, either from their social media network or just by recommendations from other sites that aggregate. You could potentially get them into a different show, and they pick those shows very selectively. They're very loyal moving forward.
I also think it depends on USA, they repeat NCIS. And that's back-to-back for like a 5-hour block. And I think I was listening to one of the guys from Trender Talk yesterday. He was talking about how that is such a social TV kind of thing. And I still, I'll use it now and sample it and find out what show it is. It'll come back and tell me the cast. And I might actually click Facebook or Twitter and no cares that I'm watching. I don't know what
He does use immediately unfollow.
But there are people who are passionate about these shows. You can actually still see what's later on. So
I like what AT is a little off topic, but Uverse and DirecTV have done recently with Miso and I Get Clue, and at least what they say they're doing, and that you can look and see what your friends are watching now and even dating now, because it does get you into things you might not be exposed to.
Yeah, we see a ton of Get Glue conversation people have. A ton of people trying to check in during show, and often afterwards, because we capture long term, so not just during one period. And people will start saying, "Oh, I just checked into the show 8 hours later." So there's a lot of that still, where people are just posting about it. I'm here. Yeah, okay.
Question about talent and TV shows. The question was curious how involved do you think talent should be in social TV? The talent in the content, the actors and the actresses, should they be involved?
I think
Does it matter?
It's really compelling to the end user. I would say that the celebrity in the celebrity world is huge. I mean, look at OMG and Yahoo cult of personality is huge, and that's what people follow on TV. So I think having the talent involved, are they really twittering when somebody's twittering from that account, or is it a professional Twitter? Goes Twitter. And I think I think people want it. I think whether talent's really involved or really on that twittering.
I think that's an interesting too. Like, do people want them to tweet as the character? Like Mad Men for a while there, they have these characters. The characters.
Those were fans.
Oh, okay.
And
adopted it.
And AMC actually went after them.
Oh, wow.
I knew some of them. So yeah, they asked a letter saying, "Don't tweet under these names," and they blew away their own, free advertising, and then they brought them on, some of them as official ones. The ones that. But so that way they could say, this one we like, this one, this is the kind of content we want, because there's a specific kind of content they didn't necessarily want those people to be putting out under their own names.
When it Stern a couple months ago, I would think he was tweeting live to his own movie, and I think there was a huge spike in tweets and all kinds of activity.
Right, yes, randomly.
He did it randomly.
Yeah.
I don't think it was planned. Sort of the director, even the director's cut commentary. So I think people do want to hear sort of the behind the scenes.
It's more about the content than the person that's they're real.
Yeah.
Or not.
Do you think there's a percentage? This one question. Do you think there's a percentage that doesn't want to hear from the character, that wants to hear from a real actor?
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
about their life.
No, I said that's an actor, but they want to know the actor's life as much. Typically, they're looking to see what other shows have they been in, who are they married to. Oh, I remember that person, and they know they're playing a part, but it's like, how did you kind of get to there? What's your celebrity status? Where I would say that maybe some of our passionate penny students may have been lost watchers, and that may be where our personas break if you look at context.
They were real.
Right.
I think Ashton.
But don't tell them they weren't.
I think Ashton Kutcher's kind of proved that people do want to hear from these personalities and the real actors. So I think it'd probably be interesting
Well, I mean,
to hear now why people are following. Are they following because of 2.5 Men? Are they following because he is, and he's got all Twitter followers? I really want to hear from him.
Well, I mean, I think Charlie Sheen, his whole thing was all story of the show as much as it was him.
Although him and his character were almost the same. A little challenging to separate them.
So a question here, and I got your feedback, and maybe even in test market situations was important, either to the evolution of a product in the beginning or to features and functionalities that come down the road. But how do you gather that feedback, and how different is that in a third-party situation, Hillary?
Well, for us, it's very, so to gather it from the end viewer, very simple tools. We can use SurveyMonkey. So and we again kind of administer all of this. And so we say, let's get feedback on our product, together. And then we can make sure that when they roll this out, that as part of the beta program, they are, it's part of being privileged enough to try out this new product. They have to go and answer a few questions kind of at the beginning, maybe to set up this up, to find it, to do all these things, and then kind of in the middle, how are things going? How many do you watch more or less videos? So we kind of get pretty early on beta, but using very simple tools. And then,
Any thoughts on that?
Well, of course we have a slightly different religion because we do a lot of qualitative. You can use quant as long as you make sure the questions are structured correctly, because people answer questions differently based on how they're worded. So you may be thinking you're getting back one thing when you're actually getting something else. Using qualitative rounds to inform the more open-ended sort of what did you do today and how did it work, and measuring that sort of like sentiment over time. We did a big study back in the early 2000s when people were first putting cable in their homes, and we watched them from the installation of their cable through like a 12-month period. So did their satisfaction with that go up or down, and no one took at it.
And Yahoo's always said that. We have a whole research group that's similar to what you guys do. I think you've been on the phone with a few of those in multiple ways, in households or, a lot of online studies the same way. And just any way you can gather information on how do we make the product better. Fantasy football guys do it all the time to figure out which features of fantasy football do we want to include and which ones need to be dropped, and how do we make that product more exciting.
The customers is when they're relying heavily on one data source for making those decisions. So we'll often, especially after we get work done, they're like, oh, well, how do we go buy ads in this space? And they've got one source for picking that out. And it's like, well, you got to look at a couple of things here to really make that decision. So sort of test early, test often, talk to your users as much as you can in different avenues. And it's amazing to us how I'll tell you stuff you never expected.
I'd love to put some of our early subscribers, viewers, in the user insight usability labs and watch them.
Yeah. Try to go through that.
Yeah.
It's always the thing we didn't expect.
Okay, so this is a great question. So there's a big race to the second screen, and then the third screen, and the fourth screen. And so the question is, are too many things going on?
I think there are too many screens. I think they're going to all consolidate.
Seriously? Really? I cannot imagine our users watching a big screen TV with all of the extra content. IMDb.
Well, no, I think
content,
the consolidation to 4. So I don't think I don't think it would be 4 screens moving forward. But I think that's way too many. The fact that we have iPads, laptops, iPhones, TV, should still be desktops. So there's like 5, right? So and what convinced me is I've been an iPad guy, right? And I just got a MacBook Air, and I can carry that just as easily as I can my iPad, right? I wish it would just fold back. Apple, that are listening,
it will
fold back. But I agree. There's always going to be the big screen experience, but these smaller, how are those going to work? And really, are we going to have that many of those?
I think we will have as many and more.
You want 4 remote controls in your house?
No, but you have different situations. Sometimes I'll be watching TV and surround sound with a big screen, and sometimes I'll be watching on an iPad. Sometimes, I hate to say it, I carry my Apple TV with me. I can hook it up anywhere. So, I don't know. And I think I have all the devices at home, and I use them for different things.
Do you think it's because you're a technologist?
I am, but then you have different segments with different people. Want to do different things in different locations. I've seen people watch the baseball game while they're at the baseball game on their phone.
With a weird delay there, too.
So you carry, you've got iPad, iPhone, so you've got 3G plans on both. You're paying for all this data usage, but really you're only using kind of work together at the end of the day. So.
Well, it's I guess more from a product design is what are we going to develop for? Kind of goes back
Right.
to the business decision. What can we afford to develop for it? I mean, Yahoo develops for